Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So what I want to do in this video is I want to talk about ego and how ego shows up in development and in spiritual enlightenment. So I'm kind of recording in my little creative area so you can see I'm working on my recipes. I got my vinegars, my oils, my spices. I've been kind of, constructing and creating recipes that I've been making for a long time. This is the first time I've ever, started to like write stuff down. I just make certain things with, I've never written them down. So now, as a creator, looking at like, what does Joseph Maynor create when it comes to cooking? So I'm taking that seriously now. And so, I have my repertoire of vinegars, oils, spices, mustard, soy sauce, just blah, blah, blah. Like what my kind of palette is for painting when it comes to cooking. And then I'm just in the process of actually trying to create recipes so that other people can make the things that I make, which is it's a totally weird process for me because I just do it. I don't think about it. I just do it. It's like, asking a jazz musician what he's doing. And he's going to sit there in an armchair and he's going to ponder it for hours and go, like, you know what I mean? I can't explain it to you. So that's kind of a similar thing, but it's good to go through the process too of trying to communicate what you do and what you like to other people, right? That's a worthwhile exercise to go through, maybe, or not. Just depends on how curious you are, in that particular area, and it also depends on like what area you're creating within, because what you teach is actually a really interesting question. And we should consider that in this video because there's egoic reasons for teaching that are both good and bad. Like ego doesn't necessarily mean bad. So for example, you could be teaching something because you genuinely believe that it will help other people. Well, that's ego too. It's like a benevolent ego, but how benevolent is that really? So what I want to do in this video is I think, we can talk about truth, we can talk about preaching, we can talk about getting everybody back on the mission statement. We can talk about, digital versus real life. But the one thing behind the curtain that almost nobody ever talks about because people are mostly tier 1, and if they are tier 2 they haven't really integrated stage yellow, right? So they're still a little bit in the dark with regard to ego. And so what I thought I would do in this video, which is an evolving thing, notice that with me, everything I do is an evolving thing. Nothing is set in stone because I'm creating. Right, I'm giving my ego away in service of creation. And it shifts, right? It shifts because it isn't beholden to a particular thought. It's allowed to be imperfect, just like all egos are. But most people don't want their ego to appear imperfect because it challenges something that they're also clinging to that will make them look bad. And so they're going to react in a way where they're going to try to reinforce a universal virtue signal that keeps them perceived to be righteous, almost like a preacher, right? Like, and they may try to denigrate other preachers or, but it ultimately is that. And I think ultimately what it is persona. I like persona because it sounds a little bit more like darker to me, which actually it kind of is what it is. Like, oh, you got a persona here, right? But you have a persona too, especially when you interact with groups. When you're by yourself, I don't know how much persona you have, right? Because you're not relating with anybody else. So there's a distinction between individual ego and family ego or group ego, collective ego. And so what I want to do in this video is I want to discuss ego, and I'm going to emphasize stage yellow and then my extended spiral stage, stage teal. So one is about understanding, the other one is about embodiment, right? And they complement each other. And then I'm going to explain how this relates with truth. So just give me 1 second, guys. All right, friends, welcome back. So the first thing I want you guys to realize is all of this is coming from my ego. I acknowledge the fact that I have an ego. I think everybody has an ego too, and not even. Right? So what we're doing is when we go down the spiral, what we say pertains to a particular spiral stage. So there is no communication that's communicating from a valueless perspective, including your own. And this is why you don't have truth with a capital T, although, of course, your ego wants to think it does. That's how you create community, by projecting confidence. Because for some reason, and I never understood this myself, most people are insecure and they need somebody to tell them what's right. I never had that for some reason. I don't understand that. I was always the exact opposite. I never felt like every time I interacted with other people, I always felt like that's where ego was being displayed, because I was being forced to be somebody who I am not. So I was almost born with this is just a pointer, it could be wrong, but a deep sense of authenticity. And I think it does come from my particular conditioning too. And I had some issues, when I was growing up, and which kind of forced me. I was alone a lot of the time, and it forced me to learn how to be okay, kind of being an outsider from a very young age. And it was always the collective ego that was an issue for me. It was fitting in. And I actually have done pretty well fitting in, especially recently, where, I have a good network now of relationships, but it wasn't always that way, especially when I was younger, when I was in college. I was kind of like the loner kid, that although when I was in high school, like the last 2 years of high school, I started to become more social and develop friendships. But my first 2 years of high school, so I would say up until the age of about 16 or so, I didn't really feel like I fit in anywhere. And then it kind of reemerged in college too, where I was living in the dorms and I was interacting with my roommates, and I didn't really get along with them for some reason. Like I've always been really enjoying my own company and enjoying what I like, and what I want to create. So I've always kind of had that as a theme. And so you can see how my ego is creating artworks in development work and in spiritual enlightenment work to kind of acknowledge itself. So the mistake I think a lot of spiritual teachers make is that they're living in the realm of social presentation. So they're, whether they want to admit this or not, they're living within a family ego instead of an individual ego. And it's so clear to me because I've spent a lot of time in both, so I understand kind of what's going on. And, you know, from a higher level, this is all just a divine play, you know. And it can even be acknowledged as divine creation. Or even further, you can realize that the whole thing is to be played with. Not in a nefarious way, but also don't exclude that. You know, so a lot of people, they think that they have this puritanical ego. Okay. So I've set up the issue here. What I want to do is I want to come back and then we're going to systematically run through the spiral and some of my extended stages to do an analysis on this. So this was just to kind of orient everybody to what we're trying to create, what I'm trying to create, and sharing it with the world on this YouTube channel. You know, I didn't realize I'm sharing everything so much with the world, but it turns out that everything I've ever posted online, right, is like, you know, I guess I shared it with the world. But, and that's okay. Like, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? It doesn't look good for me necessarily, but it's authentic. And I've always been an authentic dude. If I have to pay the price for being an authentic dude, then so be it. You know what I mean? You know, I feel fortunate that I'm able to make a living and that I have people that around me that are supportive of me. But, you know, it's a weird time now with the social media stuff and the hyping, and you don't even know who you're dealing with online. See, I've always used my name and photo when I interact on... No, I shouldn't say always. Actually, there was a time when I used an avatar, maybe like in 20... I think the first time I came online was hotsoup.com, and then it was Yahoo Answers, and then there was like maybe, I think it was Yahoo Answers. This was way back though. I used a pseudonym. But from 2017 on, I used my real name, actually. And, you know, most people won't do that. You don't even know what people look like online anymore, right? So, but the reason why I did that is because I've always been concerned with personal development. Like, if it's not, I don't care about money. I don't care about hyping myself to create a community to funnel in money. I don't care about that. I make money. I have a job. And I'm able to make money doing my job. So it's not, I don't want to make money, you know, just being some kind of marketer or YouTuber or anything like that. I have a job, I make money. My focus has always been on, not always, but from about 2014 onward, it's been about personal development. That's what I'm interested in. And I got to tell you guys, I have made a lot of progress. I mean, even those of you who have like attacked me or we've had a conflict with, it's all benefited me. All of it has benefited me in a way that I almost want to thank you. You know what I mean? For engaging with me, for how long you did. And even people who have rejected me, you know, I look at it like that's helped me too, right? It's helped me kind of question myself and say, you know, is there something that I can change that will actually make me better? But first, you have to acknowledge that you're an individual self. You know, you can't hide behind this like, well, there is no separate self. You know, God is all there is, but it's not the religious God. It's the God in your mind. that you're using to convince other people that you're superior to them. Or maybe it's like you're nitpicking everybody's things apart. So you're kind of nitpicking their reality apart so that they become destabilized. This is all ego. And it's extreme ego, actually. And but then they can turn it around on me. They can say, well, the fact that you go out there as Joseph Maynor, you're a separate self, which is a demon or something like that, right? So it's like you're taking this like extreme stance. I'm kind of taking this extreme stance. We're looking at each other and we're shooting at each other, but nobody is really right or wrong. It's just a difference in perspective. It's a difference in ego. It's a difference in gatekeeping and showing up in the world and what you're trying to do and your situation too. Like, are you trying to keep a community alive, or are you just basically being yourself? Because if you're being yourself and somebody else is trying to keep a community alive, you're going to be seen as a troublemaker. If you're trying to keep a community alive and you're interacting with somebody who's being themselves, you're going to be seen as a cult, right? And I'm just basically kind of explaining the dichotomies here, but it doesn't have to be that extreme. But I'm telling a story in a 30-minute video, so I'm kind of forced to be a little bit abrupt. But I try to be abrupt without losing nuance and detail if I can. I mean, that's my role as a communicator. So I'm going to come back and we'll run through the spiral and my extended stage, teal, so that we can really access a deeper pointer or network of pointers so that we can understand the ego a little bit better. So just give me 1 second. All right, friends, welcome back. So what I want to do, just to kind of break the ice a little bit in the second half of this video, is I've been working on codifying my own recipes for things. And one of the things about me I don't know if it's because I've traveled around a lot around the world, but I tend to have a sauce first mentality when it comes to cooking. So I know there's like sauce first, protein first kind of approaches. So, for example, French cooking is very protein first. You have a protein and then the sauce is an accompaniment. Well, I flip that around. I have a little bit more of an Indian food influence, I think, where like the sauce is the most important thing. And then everything else is kind of an accompaniment to the sauce. So that is interesting with me. And then, I've been learning about other cuisines. So, some cuisines use a lot of butter. The problem, or a lot of spice blends like chili powder, curry powder. The problem with these is that they're very dominating, right? And so you lose the flavor of the actual ingredients. But then on the flip side of that, when you use a lot of butter, you can't really use a lot of other spices because the butter is very dominating. You can't really use soy sauce. You can't use a whole lot of dried spices, maybe like fresh herbs or something like that. So my particular style of cooking generally is to start with the sauce and then to build off of the sauce. And you'll figure out, different people have different styles, with regard to cooking. But actually, it's very interesting to figure out what your style is, what your ego prefers to create in that particular area of creation. So this is why I think it is important to acknowledge the separate self. This is one of the areas that I guess my ego disagrees with, but I also realize this has to be the case because every possibility has to express itself. So the idea that there is no separate self is always often, just has to be out there. It's not personal. But the thing about, let's go back to spiral dynamics now, those of you guys who have a little bit of a background in spiral dynamics. The tier 1 stages are not conscious of ego. So stage green on down the spiral, they're not conscious of ego. You don't become conscious of ego until you hit stage yellow. Then you become intellectually aware of ego at stage yellow, both from an individual standpoint and a collective standpoint. And this, you might, gloss this as systems thinking. So yellow sees reality as systems with egos. And it's very conscious of this. It's not, it doesn't like fall into the traps that earlier spiral stages fall into. So maybe, let me riff off of these. Let's go down the spiral. So stage green doesn't think it has an ego because it thinks it's doing right by all sentient life. Stage orange doesn't think it has, Stage orange doesn't think that it has an ego because it thinks everybody has an ego. It's like a fish swimming in water, not realizing that it's swimming in water. It just assumes that the water is invisible because it's not acknowledged, right? It's just like when you're at stage orange, you just assume everybody is an individual, self-interested actor it's basically individualism, but without the moral part of it. So we'll go back down to the next stage down, which is blue. Blue has this really moral aspect, and it doesn't see this. It just sees that there's right and wrong, true and false, in these very kind of binary categories that apply to basic human life. And for some reason, people gravitate toward this. I don't know why. I think it's because they're trying to rid themselves of the evil side of themselves. And they've been told that they have to shape up or ship out. Right? Shape up, ship out, or ship out. Right? Very stage blue. And this is here. I mean, you can reintegrate this too. You can become a person like this even, right? Your situation will create, to a certain extent, how your ego operates too, because you're not just an ego in isolation. You're a node in a network of relations with other egos or complex adaptive systems. Okay, so I'm giving you the stage yellow perspective as I'm going down the spiral. So stage yellow is the spiral wizard, the first spiral wizard stage. And so they can see the limitations of everything that goes underneath that. All right. So stage red, the ego of stage red is everybody is stupid and I'm going to go for what's good for me. I'm going to dominate everything around me. So stage red doesn't really acknowledge the link. See, stage blue is all about morality because morality has to do with love. Love has to do with community. Love has to do with relation. So, for example, if you buy a dog, you got to take care of that dog. You got to make sure that that dog has food, that it has veterinary, care, that it has whatever, that's very stage blue. Stage red would look at it like that dog is basically just an extension of me. However I treat that dog, it's up to me. That dog is just me. See, that's stage red. Stage red is entirely about what can you do for me? And stage red Actually, stage red is so simple-minded that they're kind of easier to deal with in a way than stage blue or stage orange. You know, working in the legal profession for a long time, I've dealt with a lot of stage red people. And actually, if you relate with them with empathy, they can reciprocate that. Stage red people aren't evil, they're people. They're not evil, they're people. But they're people who have not integrated really a lot beyond a certain point. They're kind of simple-minded. Stage blue is simple-minded too. I mean, all these stages are simple-minded when you're looking at it from a stage that goes above it, right? That is above it, rather. You don't see simple-mindedness until you're at a stage that's higher. But that doesn't take away their humanity. I mean, I've had relationships with stage red people. They're not people that I had like a sustained relationship with, but I've had to interact with them like in because of a lawsuit, because I work as a senior litigation paralegal. So there are cases or there are instances where that I've interfaced with stage red people, and they're usually actually very respectful if they think that you're working for them, right? So you have to realize too that evil is a very delicate term. And I think this is used a lot of the time for collective ego. Because if we can scapegoat somebody and say that person is a problem child, then it causes us as a collective ego to recenter ourselves in our relation, because that's what we're concerned with. A lot of people don't realize this. This is systems thinking. So if we go to stage purple, in systems thinking, it starts at stage yellow, right? So you have to see like the fact that you were labeled as a scapegoat or a problem child or a foil has less to do with you and more to do with the collective ego trying to solidify itself and strengthen itself. But they're using a series of scapegoats in order to do that. You can see this actually in businesses too. If you've ever had a job, right? This happens too. In a dysfunctional kind of work environment where like somebody is scapegoated, because there's it's like a dysfunctional situation. There's a lot of like really bad things going on. Somebody is scapegoated and then they're let go, and then that allows the community to discharge or put into the shadow its issues and basically pin them on that person as that person walks away. So it's a temporary move for a collective ego to try to re-solidify itself. So individual ego and collective ego are different. But this is obviously just a set of pointers. So when it comes to stage teal, so we talked about yellow. I told you guys teal was going to be the embodiment or the integration stage. You need to realize that you have an ego and that ego exists. So you have that stage yellow integration. But also realize too that it's okay for ego to be here. I think a lot of problems in development work and self-help is the denial that you have an ego or that you participate in systems that have ego. And then it's a need to judge those systems as being untrue or bad or demons or devils or whatever you need to do, instead of realizing you're that too as an ego. And that is the opening up for the possibility of love, actually, is the realization that we're all doing this on some level. Okay, friends? I'll talk to you soon. Take care.